Simone Carter pressed her back against the cold brick wall of the downtown Chicago office building, her fingers trembling as she held the cardboard sign. The words were simple: anything helps. God bless. 5 years ago, she would have walked past someone like herself without a second glance. 5 years ago, she had worn tailored business suits and carried a leather briefcase. 5 years ago, she had been someone's wife. Someone's mother. Now she was invisible. The lunch crowd rushed past her in waves. Men in expensive suits, women in heels that clicked against the sidewalk, all of them looking through her as if she were made of glass. Simone had learned not to make eye contact. It only made people uncomfortable, made them walk faster, clutch their bags tighter. She kept her eyes down, watching shoes instead of faces. Black leather Oxfords. Red pumps. White sneakers. Then she saw the small pink sneakers. They stopped right in front of her. Simone's heart began to pound so hard she thought her chest might crack open. She knew those sneakers. She had bought an identical pair years ago, though these were bigger now. A child's voice cut through the noise of the street, high and clear and achingly familiar. Dad, wait. Simone's breath caught in her throat. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at her to run, to hide, to disappear, she lifted her eyes. The little girl wore a bright blue winter coat with white buttons. Her hair was pulled back in two neat braids. She was taller than Simone remembered, her face losing its baby roundness, but those eyes were exactly the same. Sophie. Come on, sweetheart. We're going to be late for lunch. The man's voice was deeper than Simone remembered, worn down by time and stress. Gregory Patterson stood a few feet away, checking his phone, his gray suit perfectly pressed, his black shoes polished to a shine. He looked older. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, silver threads in his dark hair. But Dad. Sophie wasn't moving. She was staring at Simone with an intensity that made Simone want to crawl inside herself and disappear. Dad, that's Mom. The world stopped. Gregory's head snapped up. His phone nearly slipped from his hand. For a moment he just stood there, frozen, his eyes moving from Sophie to the homeless woman against the wall. Simone watched his face change, watched recognition fight with disbelief, watched shock give way to something she couldn't quite name. Sophie, that's not. His voice trailed off. He took a step closer, then another. His eyes narrowed, studying Simone's face beneath the dirt and exhaustion. Simone? She wanted to run. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to get up and disappear into the crowd, to spare them all this moment, this horrible reunion. But Sophie's eyes held her in place, those wide brown eyes that had once looked at her with pure love and trust. I'm sorry. The words came out as a whisper, broken and raw. I'm so sorry. Could you really walk away from your own child? Could you survive 5 years of regret, knowing your daughter was growing up without you? If this story moves you, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what you would do in Simone's position. Would you have the courage to face your family again? The morning had started like every other morning for the past 5 years. Simone had woken up in the women's shelter on West Madison Street, packed her few belongings into a worn backpack, and made her way to her usual spot downtown. The weather was cold but clear, one of those December days where the sun shone bright but gave no warmth. She chose her location carefully, always the same spot outside the Patterson and Associates building. It was a cruel joke she played on herself, sitting outside the company her ex-husband had built from the ground up. Sometimes she caught glimpses of him through the glass doors, talking on his phone, shaking hands with clients. He never looked at the homeless woman outside his building. Why would he? By noon, she had collected about $8 in change and a half-eaten sandwich someone had left on the bench beside her. She was grateful for it. The shelter breakfast had been thin oatmeal and weak coffee, and her stomach had been growling for hours. Then she heard the voices. Can we get pizza, Dad? Please? Sophie's voice carried across the sidewalk, cutting through traffic noise and conversation. Simone's entire body went rigid. She knew that voice the way she knew her own heartbeat. For 5 years she had imagined what Sophie might sound like as she grew older, how her voice might change from toddler babble to real words and sentences. The reality was somehow better and worse than anything she had imagined. We're meeting Mr. Chen for lunch, remember? He's expecting us at the steakhouse. Gregory's voice was patient but firm. He had always been good with Sophie, even when she was a colicky baby who cried for hours. Even when Simone had been falling apart, unable to cope, drowning in fears she couldn't name. Simone pulled her hood lower over her face, hunching down, trying to make herself smaller. They would walk right past her. They always did. Gregory never looked at the homeless people who lined the streets near his office. He had told her once years ago that it was too painful, that he felt guilty but helpless, so he had learned not to see them at all. The footsteps came closer. Simone held her breath. Then they stopped. Dad, wait. No. Please no. What is it, honey? Gregory's voice was distracted. Simone could picture him checking his watch, calculating how late they would be. Dad. Sophie's voice was different now, uncertain and wondering. That lady. Dad, that's Mom. The silence that followed was the longest of Simone's life. She kept her head down, her hands gripping her cardboard sign so hard the edges crumpled. Maybe if she didn't move, didn't breathe, they would walk away. Maybe Sophie was wrong. Maybe she didn't really remember. Sophie, sweetheart, that's not. Gregory's voice was gentle but firm. Your mother isn't here. But Dad, look at her. Look at her eyes. Simone felt them both staring at her now. The weight of their attention was crushing. Slowly, knowing she couldn't hide anymore, she lifted her head and met Gregory's gaze. She watched the color drain from his face. His mouth opened but no sound came out. He took a step forward, then another, until he was standing right in front of her. Up close she could see the changes in him more clearly. The lines around his mouth, the tiredness in his eyes, the way he held himself with a stiffness that hadn't been there before. Simone. Her name on his lips after 5 years of silence. My God. Simone. Sophie broke away from her father's side and dropped to her knees on the sidewalk beside Simone. She was staring at her mother with an expression Simone couldn't read, something between wonder and confusion and hurt. Mommy? The word was small and uncertain. Is it really you? Simone's throat closed. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to reach out and touch her daughter's face, to pull her close and never let go, but she was afraid. Afraid of the dirt on her hands, the smell of the streets that clung to her clothes, the 5 years of absence that stood between them like a wall. I'm sorry. The words tumbled out, broken and desperate. I'm so sorry. I never meant to leave. I never meant to stay away. I was sick and I was scared and I thought you were better off without me. Mom? Sophie's voice cracked. Tears streamed down her small face. Without warning, she threw her arms around Simone's neck, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. Simone wrapped her arms around her daughter and held on tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid warmth of her small body. 5 years of loneliness, of regret, of self-hatred, all came pouring out in harsh, ugly sobs that shook her entire frame. Gregory stood over them, his hand covering his mouth, his eyes wide with shock. After a long moment, he slowly lowered himself to the sidewalk beside them, heedless of his expensive suit. He reached out and placed his hand on Simone's shoulder. What happened? His voice was rough with emotion. Where have you been? Simone couldn't answer. She couldn't find the words to explain 5 years of hell, 5 years of running from ghosts that lived inside her own head. She just held Sophie and cried while pedestrians walked around them, some staring, most pretending not to see. Finally, Gregory spoke again, his voice steady and certain. Come home. Come home with us right now. Simone lifted her head, searching his face for anger, for disgust, for the rejection she knew she deserved. But all she saw was concern and something that might have been the echo of old love. I can't just show up after 5 years like nothing happened. You're not showing up like nothing happened. You're coming home because Sophie needs you. Because... He paused, swallowing hard. Because we both need you. Sophie pulled back and looked at her mother with those serious brown eyes. Please come home, Mommy. Please. How could she say no to that? How could she refuse when her daughter was looking at her with such hope, such longing? The shame that had kept her on these streets for 5 years suddenly seemed less important than the little girl in her arms. Okay. The word came out as a whisper. Okay. Gregory stood and offered her his hand. Simone hesitated for only a moment before taking it. His grip was warm and strong as he pulled her to her feet. Sophie grabbed her other hand, holding tight. Together, the three of them walked away from the spot where Simone had spent so many lonely hours, away from the cardboard sign and the empty cup, toward the parking garage where Gregory's car waited. Simone didn't look back. The nursery had been painted a soft yellow, with white curtains and a mobile of singing birds hanging over the crib. Simone stood in the doorway watching the afternoon sunlight stream through the windows, and felt nothing but dread. Sophie was 3 months old and perfect. She had Gregory's dark hair and Simone's brown eyes. She slept well, ate well, hardly ever cried. Everyone said Simone was lucky to have such an easy baby. Everyone said she should be grateful. But all Simone felt was terror. It had started small, just a whisper in the back of her mind a few weeks after Sophie was born. A tiny voice that said, "You're going to hurt her." At first, Simone had dismissed it as exhaustion, as the normal anxiety every new mother felt. But the voice grew louder, more insistent, until it was screaming in her head every time she picked up her daughter. "You're going to drop her. You're going to forget her in the bathtub. You're going to lose control and shake her when she cries." Simone knew these thoughts were wrong. She loved Sophie with a fierceness that took her breath away. The idea of hurting her own child was so repulsive it made her physically sick. But the thoughts wouldn't stop. They followed her every moment of every day, growing darker and more violent until Simone was afraid to be alone with her own baby. She hadn't told Gregory. How could she? He was so proud of their little family, so happy to be a father. He would look at her with those warm eyes and ask how she was feeling, and Simone would lie and say she was fine, just tired. All new mothers were tired. But she wasn't fine. She was losing her mind. "There you are." Gregory came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He smelled like coffee and the sandalwood soap he used. "Sophie's been asleep for an hour. Why don't you take a nap too? You look exhausted." Simone leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I'm okay." "You don't look okay. You haven't looked okay for weeks." His voice was gentle but concerned. "Maybe we should call your doctor. Could this be postpartum depression?" Depression. That was a word Simone could understand. Depression meant sadness, maybe some anxiety, trouble sleeping. Depression was normal, treatable. But what Simone had was something else entirely, something dark and terrifying that she couldn't name. "I'm just tired." She pulled away from him, moving toward the stairs. "I think I will lie down for a bit." But she didn't sleep. She lay in their bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to the voice in her head grow louder and louder. "You're dangerous. You're going to hurt her. She's not safe with you." That night, while Gregory slept peacefully beside her and Sophie dozed in her crib down the hall, Simone made a decision. If she was dangerous, if she truly believed she might hurt her daughter, then there was only one solution. She had to leave. At 3 a.m, she slipped out of bed and dressed quietly in the dark. She took nothing but her wallet and phone. She didn't leave a note. What would she say? "I'm leaving because I'm afraid I'll hurt our baby?" Gregory would never understand. He would try to stop her, try to get her help, and Simone was convinced that no amount of help could fix what was broken inside her. She walked out the front door and kept walking. She turned off her phone after the first dozen calls from Gregory went unanswered. She couldn't talk to him. She couldn't hear his voice, begging her to come home when she knew that home was the most dangerous place she could be. For the first few days, she stayed in cheap motels on the outskirts of the city, paying with cash. Then her money ran out and she found herself in a shelter. Then on the streets. The descent was faster than she could have imagined. The voices in her head began to quiet once she was far away from Sophie. Without her daughter nearby, the terrible thoughts lost their power. But by then Simone was lost in a different way. She was drowning in shame and self-hatred, convinced that she had done the right thing but destroyed in the process. Months turned into years. Simone took odd jobs when she could, washing dishes in restaurant kitchens, cleaning office buildings at night. But she could never hold a position for long. The depression that had started as intrusive thoughts evolved into something heavier, darker, pulling her down until some mornings she couldn't find the energy to get out of her sleeping bag. She thought about going home every single day. She imagined walking up to the front door, ringing the bell, seeing Sophie's face. But every time she came close, the fear returned. What if the thoughts came back? What if she really was dangerous? Better to stay away. Better to let Sophie grow up thinking her mother had abandoned her than to risk being the mother who hurt her. So Simone stayed on the streets, watching the seasons change, watching the years pass, trapped in a prison of her own making. The first winter was the hardest. Simone learned quickly that the city was a different place when you had nowhere to go. The people who had smiled at her when she wore business suits now crossed the street to avoid her. The shops she used to browse through had security guards who watched her with suspicious eyes. Even the weather felt more brutal when you couldn't escape it. She spent her first winter night in a shelter on the south side. The building was old and overcrowded, with rows of cots lined up so close together you could hear every cough, every nightmare, every whispered conversation. The woman in the cot next to Simone introduced herself as Beverly. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and hands that shook when she wasn't holding something. "First time here?" Beverly asked. Simone nodded, not trusting her voice. "Gets easier. Not better, but easier." Beverly pulled her thin blanket up to her chin. "How'd you end up here?" "I left my family." The words felt like stones in Simone's mouth. Beverly didn't ask why. That was one thing Simone learned quickly about life on the streets. People didn't ask too many questions. Everyone had their own story, their own reasons, their own shame. As weeks turned into months, Simone developed a routine. She woke up at dawn, packed her belongings and left the shelter before breakfast. She spent her days walking, sometimes looking for work, more often just moving to stay warm. She found a soup kitchen that served lunch at noon and another that served dinner at 6. In between, she sat on sidewalks with a cardboard sign, collecting enough money for the occasional coffee or sandwich. The voices in her head had quieted, just as she had hoped. Without Sophie nearby, without the constant presence of her baby, the terrible intrusive thoughts faded to distant whispers. But in their place came a new kind of torment, grief. Simone grieved for the life she had lost, for the daughter she would never see grow up, for the husband who must hate her now. She thought about calling Gregory 1,000 times. Her phone had died weeks after she left, but she could use a pay phone or borrow someone's cell. But what would she say? "I'm sorry I left without explanation? I was sick and thought I was protecting you?" None of it seemed adequate. None of it would fix what she had broken. By the second year, Simone had become invisible. She could stand on a corner for hours and people would walk past without seeing her. She learned to make herself small, to take up as little space as possible, to expect nothing from anyone. But there were moments of kindness that kept her going. Like the day a woman stopped and gave her a pair of warm gloves. Or the restaurant owner who let her wash dishes in exchange for a hot meal. Or Beverly, who shared her blanket on the coldest nights and never once judged her for the choices that had led her here. "You should go back," Beverly told her one night about 3 years after Simone had left home. "Whatever happened, however bad it was, you should go back to your family." "I can't." Simone's voice was flat with certainty. "Why not?" "Because I don't deserve them. Because I'm broken. Because they're better off without me." Beverly was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "That's what I told myself too. That my kids were better off without their drunk mother stumbling around. Now they're grown and I haven't seen them in 15 years. You think they're better off? You think they don't wonder every day why their mama left?" The words hit Simone like a physical blow. She had never thought about it that way, had never considered what her absence might mean to Sophie. In Simone's mind, leaving had been an act of protection, of love. But what if Sophie didn't see it that way? What if Sophie thought her mother simply didn't want her? Still, Simone couldn't bring herself to go back. The fear was too strong, the shame too deep. So she stayed on the streets, year after year, watching the city change around her, watching her daughter grow up from a distance. She had developed a habit of positioning herself near Gregory's office building. It was torture and comfort at the same time. Some days she would catch glimpses of him through the glass doors, still successful, still confident. He looked tired, older, but he was surviving without her. She never saw Sophie. Gregory must have kept her away from downtown, away from the homeless people who lined the streets. Simone was grateful for that. At least Sophie was growing up safe, protected, loved. By the 5th year, Simone had almost convinced herself that this was her life now. That she would spend the rest of her days on these streets, invisible and alone, paying for her sins through endless loneliness. She had almost accepted it. Then Sophie's small pink sneakers appeared in front of her, and everything changed. The car ride to Gregory's penthouse was silent except for Sophie's occasional sniffles. She sat in the back seat with Simone, holding her mother's hand in a grip so tight it almost hurt. Simone stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of Chicago roll past, unable to believe this was really happening. Gregory kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. Simone wondered what he was thinking. Was he angry? Disgusted? Did he regret his offer to bring her home the moment it left his mouth? The parking garage beneath Gregory's building was clean and well lit, nothing like the dark underpasses where Simone sometimes slept. Gregory pulled into his assigned spot and killed the engine. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sophie spoke, her voice small but determined. "Dad, Mom is coming upstairs with us, right? She's staying?" Gregory turned in his seat to look at them. His eyes met Simone's and she saw something complicated there, a mixture of pain and confusion and something that might have been concern. "Yes, sweetheart. Your mother is staying." Simone's throat tightened. "Gregory, I don't want to impose. Maybe a hotel?" "No." His voice was firm. "You're not staying in a hotel. You're not going anywhere until we figure this out." He got out of the car and came around to open Simone's door. She climbed out slowly, suddenly aware of how she must look in her stained clothes, with her unwashed hair and dirt under her fingernails. This man had once loved her, had once promised to spend his life with her, and now she was bringing the smell of the streets into his expensive car. The elevator ride up to the 20th floor felt like an eternity. Sophie held Simone's hand the entire time, occasionally looking up at her mother as if to make sure she was really there. Gregory stood on the other side of the elevator, his hands in his pockets, his jaw tight. The penthouse was exactly what Simone had expected. Modern, spacious, impeccably decorated. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was all clean lines and neutral colors. It looked nothing like the home they had shared 5 years ago, the cozy townhouse with the yellow nursery and the garden out back. "This is where you live now?" Simone's voice sounded strange to her own ears, rusty from lack of use. "We moved about 3 years ago." Gregory set his keys on the entrance table. The old house had too many memories. The implication hung in the air between them. "Too many memories of you." Sophie tugged on Simone's hand. "Come see my room, Mommy. I have my own bathroom and everything." Sophie's room was painted a bright green with white trim. Posters of pop stars covered one wall, and a bookshelf overflowed with chapter books and graphic novels. A bulletin board above her desk was covered in photos and drawings. Simone's eyes caught on one photo in particular, a much younger Sophie, maybe 3 years old, sitting on Simone's lap. Both of them were laughing. "I kept this picture," Sophie said quietly, following her mother's gaze. "Dad said I could take it down if it made me sad, but I didn't want to. I wanted to remember you." Simone's vision blurred with tears. "I thought about you every single day. Every single day for 5 years. Then why didn't you come home?" The question was direct, painfully honest in the way only children could be. Before Simone could answer, Gregory appeared in the doorway. "Sophie, why don't you give your mom some space to get cleaned up? She can use the guest bathroom and I'll find her some clothes to wear." Sophie hesitated, clearly unwilling to let her mother out of her sight. Finally, she nodded and released Simone's hand. "You'll still be here when I come back, right? You won't leave again?" The question broke Simone's heart. "I promise. I won't leave." Gregory led Simone down the hall to a spacious guest room with its own attached bathroom. The bathroom was larger than some of the shelter rooms she had stayed in, all white marble and chrome fixtures. "There are fresh towels in the cabinet," Gregory said, standing in the doorway. "Take your time. I'll leave some clothes on the bed." He started to leave, then paused. Without turning around, he said, "I need to know what happened, Simone. I need to understand why you left. Why you stayed away. But right now I think you need to rest. We can talk later." "Gregory." Her voice stopped him. "Thank you. For bringing me here. For not." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Sophie recognized you. How could I say no to her?" His voice was carefully neutral. "We'll figure out the rest later." After he left, Simone stood in the middle of the bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized herself. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. Her hair, which she used to keep neatly styled, hung in tangled mats around her face. She looked like a ghost. The shower was hot and endless. Simone stood under the spray until her skin turned pink, scrubbing away 5 years of street grime. She washed her hair 3 times, used an entire bar of soap and still didn't feel clean. But she felt more human than she had in a long time. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a fluffy white towel, she found clothes laid out on the bed. Sweatpants, a red long-sleeved shirt, underwear still in the package, thick socks. Everything was brand new. Gregory must have sent someone to buy them while she was in the shower. Dressed and marginally more presentable, Simone sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she had been sitting on a sidewalk, invisible and alone. Now she was in a penthouse apartment, clean and warm, her daughter down the hall. It didn't feel real. A soft knock on the door made her jump. "Mom? Can I come in?" "Of course, baby." Sophie slipped into the room and climbed onto the bed next to Simone. For a long moment they just sat together in silence. Then Sophie said, "I used to look for you. Whenever we went anywhere, I would look at all the people, hoping one of them would be you." "Sophie." Simone's voice cracked. "Dad said you were sick. He said maybe you couldn't come home. But I didn't understand." Sophie leaned against her mother's side. "I just wanted you back." Simone wrapped her arm around her daughter and held her close. "I was sick. I was so sick and I was scared and I made a terrible mistake. I thought leaving was the right thing to do, but I was wrong. I should have stayed. I should have gotten help. I'm so sorry." "Are you still sick? Are you going to leave again?" "I don't know if I'm still sick," Simone answered honestly. "But I promise you I'm not going to leave. Even if I'm scared, even if things are hard, I'm going to stay and fight." You deserve better than what I gave you. Sophie was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she said, Dad is scared too. I can tell. But he still brought you home. Your dad is a good man. He missed you, Sophie said simply. He doesn't say it, but I know he did. Before Simone could respond, Gregory appeared in the doorway again. Dinner will be here in 20 minutes. I ordered Chinese food. Sophie, can you set the table? Sophie hopped off the bed and skipped out of the room, leaving Simone and Gregory alone. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. You look better, he said finally. I feel better. Thank you for the clothes. It's nothing. He was quiet for a moment, then said, Dr. Rachel Kim is a psychiatrist I know through work. She specializes in postpartum mental health issues. I called her and she's willing to see you tomorrow if you're comfortable with that. Simone's first instinct was to say no, to refuse, to insist she didn't need help. But that instinct was what had kept her on the streets for 5 years. She thought about Sophie's question. Are you going to leave again? She thought about the promise she had just made. Okay, she said. I'll see her. Gregory's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if he had been bracing for an argument. Good. That's good. They stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment, the weight of 5 years hanging between them. Finally, Gregory said, I was angry at you for so long. Furious. I thought you had just decided you didn't want us anymore, that being a mother was too hard and you gave up. Simone flinched but didn't look away. But seeing you today on that sidewalk? He shook his head. Whatever happened, it wasn't that simple. I can see that now. I never stopped loving you, Simone whispered. Either of you. That was never the problem. Then help me understand what was. So she told him. Not everything, not yet, but enough. She told him about the intrusive thoughts, the terror, the certainty that she was dangerous. She told him about running away because she thought it was the only way to keep Sophie safe. And she told him about the 5 years after, about the shame and depression that had kept her from coming home even after the thoughts had quieted. Gregory listened without interrupting. When she finished, his eyes were wet. You should have told me, he said. We could have gotten you help. We could have faced it together. I know that now. But at the time I couldn't think straight. I wasn't in my right mind. Postpartum psychosis, Gregory said. That's what Dr. Kim thinks it was based on what I told her. It's rare but serious. And treatable. Simone closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. If I had just gone to a doctor. If I had just told someone. You can't change the past, Gregory said gently. But you can do better going forward. For Sophie. And for yourself. From the kitchen, Sophie called out, The food is here. Come eat before it gets cold. Gregory pushed off from the doorframe. Come on. Let's have dinner. We can talk more later. As Simone followed him to the dining room, she felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Dr. Rachel Kim's office was in a modern building near Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The waiting room was painted a calming blue, with comfortable chairs and magazines Simone couldn't focus on. Gregory sat beside her, his presence both comforting and awkward. You don't have to stay, Simone said for the 3rd time. I want to understand, Gregory replied, just as he had the other 2 times. If you're comfortable with me being there. Before Simone could answer, the office door opened and a woman in her 40s stepped out. She had short black hair and wore maroon slacks with a cream blouse. Her smile was warm but professional. Simone? I'm Dr. Kim. Please come in. The office was bright and welcoming with large windows that overlooked the city. Dr. Kim gestured to a comfortable couch and Simone sat down, Gregory beside her. The doctor settled into a chair across from them, a notepad in her lap. I want to thank you for coming in so quickly, Dr. Kim began. I know this situation is complicated and probably overwhelming. Let me start by saying that everything we discuss here is confidential. Gregory has explained the basics of what happened, but I'd like to hear from you directly. Can you tell me about what you were experiencing before you left? Simone's hands twisted together in her lap. Where did she even start? How did she explain the inexplicable terror that had driven her from her home, from her child? I was afraid, she said finally. After Sophie was born, I started having these thoughts. Terrible thoughts about hurting her. Every time I picked her up, every time I was alone with her, my mind would show me these horrible images of what I might do. Dropping her down the stairs. Forgetting her in the bath. Shaking her until she stopped crying. She heard Gregory's sharp intake of breath but didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Dr. Kim, who was nodding calmly. I knew the thoughts were wrong, Simone continued. I loved Sophie more than anything. The idea of actually hurting her made me sick. But the thoughts wouldn't stop. They got louder and louder until I couldn't think about anything else. I became convinced that I was dangerous, that something was fundamentally broken inside me, and that the only way to keep Sophie safe was to stay away from her. So you left, Dr. Kim said gently. I left. In the middle of the night I just walked out. I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought I was protecting her. Simone's voice broke. I didn't know there was a name for what I was experiencing. I didn't know it was treatable. I just knew I couldn't trust myself around my own child. Dr. Kim leaned forward slightly. What you're describing sounds very much like postpartum psychosis. It's a serious but treatable mental health condition that affects roughly 1 or 2 in every 1,000 women after childbirth. It's characterized by intrusive thoughts, often violent or disturbing in nature, that the mother knows are irrational but can't control. But I didn't hurt her, Simone said. I never actually did anything. That's very common with postpartum psychosis, Dr. Kim explained. The thoughts are intrusive, meaning they're unwanted and distressing. They don't reflect your true desires or intentions. Most mothers with this condition never act on these thoughts precisely because they find them so horrifying. But the fear that they might act on them can be paralyzing. Gregory spoke for the first time. Why didn't I notice? I lived with her. How did I miss this? It's not your fault, Dr. Kim said. Many women hide their symptoms because they're ashamed or afraid of being judged. And postpartum psychosis can develop quickly, sometimes within days or weeks of giving birth. Simone, did you tell anyone about these thoughts? No. Simone's voice was barely a whisper. I was too scared. I thought if I told anyone they would take Sophie away from me. Or worse, that I would confirm what I already believed, that I was a danger to her. The shame and isolation you felt are typical of this condition, Dr. Kim said. But I want you to understand something very important. Postpartum psychosis is a medical condition, not a moral failing. It's caused by a combination of hormonal changes, sleep deprivation and genetic factors. You didn't choose to have these thoughts. You didn't fail as a mother. Your brain was experiencing a temporary but serious chemical imbalance. Tears streamed down Simone's face. If it was temporary, why didn't it go away? The initial postpartum psychosis likely resolved once you were away from the triggering situation, Dr. Kim explained. But by then you were dealing with severe depression, trauma from the experience and the guilt of leaving your family. Those conditions can be just as debilitating and much longer lasting, especially without treatment. Gregory's hand found Simone's and squeezed gently. She glanced at him and saw tears on his cheeks too. Can she get better? He asked. Can we help her? Absolutely, Dr. Kim said. With the right treatment, which typically includes therapy and possibly medication, most people fully recover from postpartum psychosis and the depression that can follow. But it's important to start now and to have a strong support system. She turned her attention back to Simone. I'd like to see you twice a week for the next few months. We'll work on processing what happened, developing coping strategies and addressing the depression. I may also refer you to a psychiatrist for medication management if we determine that would be helpful. Okay. Simone nodded, wiping her eyes. I'll do whatever it takes. I also recommend that Gregory attend some sessions, either with you or separately, so he can better understand what you experienced and how to support your recovery. Of course, Gregory said immediately. Whatever she needs. The rest of the session focused on practical matters. Scheduling appointments, discussing warning signs to watch for, creating a safety plan. By the time they left Dr. Kim's office, Simone felt exhausted but lighter somehow, as if naming the thing that had destroyed her life had taken away some of its power. In the car, Gregory was quiet for several minutes. Then he said, I wish you had told me. I wish I had known. Would you have believed me? Would you have understood? I don't know, he admitted. But I would have tried. I would have gotten you help. I know that now. Simone stared out the window. I know so many things now that I wish I had known then. Dr. Kim is right though. We can't change the past. We can only move forward. He glanced over at her. Sophie has been asking when you're coming home. She thinks you're just visiting. What do you want me to tell her? Gregory was quiet for a long moment. Tell her the truth. That you're staying. That you're getting help. That you're going to be the mother she deserves. Gregory, I don't expect us to just pick up where we left off. I don't expect you to forgive me or take me back or anything like that. I just want to be in Sophie's life. I know. His voice was soft. But Sophie wants more than that. She wants her mother back. And honestly, Simone, I think I do too. Not right away. Not until we've worked through everything. But eventually. Simone's breath caught. You can't mean that. I loved you for 8 years. That doesn't just disappear. He kept his eyes on the road. I spent 5 years being angry at you, but underneath that anger, I never stopped loving you. I just thought you didn't love us back. Now I know the truth was more complicated. I don't deserve your kindness. Maybe not. But I'm giving it anyway. He pulled into the parking garage beneath his building. That's what love is, isn't it? Giving people more than they deserve and hoping they become the person you believe they can be. They sat in the car for a moment after he killed the engine, both of them processing everything that had been said. Finally, Simone said, I'll try. I promise I'll try to be better. That's all any of us can do. When they got back to the penthouse, Sophie was waiting by the door. She had been staying with Gregory's sister for the appointment, and she launched herself at Simone the moment she walked in. You're back. You're really back. I'm back, baby. I'm not going anywhere. That night, Sophie insisted that Simone tuck her into bed. Simone sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, stroking her hair the way she used to when Sophie was a baby, and felt something inside her chest begin to heal. Tell me a story, Sophie said sleepily. What kind of story? A happy one. With a good ending. Simone thought for a moment, then began. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who loved her mother very much. But one day the mother got sick and had to go away. The little girl was sad and she missed her mother every single day. But the mother never stopped loving her daughter, even when they were apart. And one day when the time was right, they found each other again. The mother got better and they lived happily together, and the little girl knew she was loved. Is that our story? Sophie's eyes were already closing. Yes, baby. That's our story. After Sophie fell asleep, Simone found Gregory in the kitchen making tea. He handed her a cup without asking if she wanted one. Thank you, she said. For everything. For believing me. For helping me. You're Sophie's mother. That means something. I want to be more than that eventually. I want to be your partner again. Gregory took a sip of his tea. Let's take it slow. Let's focus on getting you healthy and rebuilding your relationship with Sophie. The rest will work itself out. Simone nodded, accepting his wisdom. She had been given a second chance and she wasn't going to waste it by rushing things. For now, it was enough to be home, to be clean and warm and safe, to know that her daughter still loved her. It was enough to have hope. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you or someone you know struggled with mental health after a major life change? Your story could help someone else feel less alone. The days settled into a rhythm. Simone woke up in the guest room each morning, still surprised by the softness of the bed, the cleanliness of the sheets. Gregory left for work early, always leaving breakfast on the counter for her. Sophie got ready for school with an enthusiasm Simone had never seen before, constantly running to the guest room to show her mother her outfit, her homework, her latest drawing. Look, Mom, I got an A on my spelling test. Look, Mom, I made this bracelet in art class. It's for you. Look, Mom, I can do a cartwheel now. Each interaction felt precious and fragile, like something that might shatter if Simone held it too tightly. She was careful not to overstep, not to act like she had the right to parent Sophie after 5 years of absence. But Sophie didn't seem to care about boundaries. She wanted her mother involved in everything, from breakfast to homework to bedtime stories. Dr. Kim had warned her about this. Sophie is going to go through phases, the doctor had said during their second session. Right now she's in the honeymoon phase, thrilled to have you back. But eventually the anger will come. The questions about why you left and stayed away. You need to be prepared for that. Simone was trying to prepare herself, but it was hard when Sophie looked at her with such pure love and joy. It was hard to imagine that turning to anger, even though she knew she deserved it. On her 4th day back, Gregory came home early from work with a woman Simone recognized as his sister, Claire. She was tall and elegant, wearing a green dress and carrying a large shopping bag. Simone, this is Claire. I don't know if you remember her from before. Of course I remember. Simone stood from the couch where she had been reading. It's good to see you. Claire's expression was carefully neutral. Gregory told me you were back. I wanted to meet you and bring you some things. She set the shopping bag on the coffee table. Inside were clothes, all new with tags still attached. Jeans, sweaters, a blue winter coat, even shoes. You didn't have to do this, Simone said, overwhelmed. You need proper clothes, Claire said simply. Gregory mentioned you only had what he bought the first day. Thank you. Really, thank you so much. Claire studied her for a long moment. I won't pretend to understand what happened or why you stayed away so long. But Sophie loves you and that's enough for me to give you a chance. Just don't hurt her again. The warning was clear but not unkind. Simone nodded. I won't. I promise I won't. After Claire left, Gregory helped Simone bring the clothes to her room. She started to put them in the dresser but he stopped her. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something, he said. You don't have to stay in the guest room. There's another bedroom down the hall, bigger than this one with a better view. I thought you might want to move there. Make it your own space. Gregory, you've already done so much. It's not charity, Simone. You're Sophie's mother. You should have a proper room here, not just a guest room that feels temporary. She followed him down the hall to a sunny room painted a soft cream color. It was indeed larger than the guest room, with big windows overlooking the city and an empty bookshelf waiting to be filled. It's beautiful. We can get you new bedding, whatever furniture you need. Make it feel like home. Home. The word felt strange and wonderful at the same time. Simone turned to Gregory, tears in her eyes. Why are you being so kind to me? After everything I did, after all the pain I caused, why aren't you angry? He was quiet for a moment, looking out the window. I was angry. For years I was so angry I could barely see straight. But seeing you on that sidewalk, seeing what you had become, I realized that anger wasn't going to help anyone. You were sick. You needed help, not hatred. Still, most people wouldn't be this generous. I'm not doing it for you, he said honestly. I'm doing it for Sophie. She needs her mother and she needs that mother to be healthy and stable. If helping you get better means my daughter is happy, then that's what I'm going to do. Simone nodded, understanding. It wasn't about her at all. It was about Sophie, as it should be. But she was grateful nonetheless. That weekend, Gregory took them shopping. Sophie insisted on helping pick out things for Simone's new room. A red comforter with white pillows, a reading lamp shaped like a bird, a soft rug for beside the bed. Simone tried to protest the expense, but Gregory waved her concerns away. Just let us do this, he said. Let us help. At the bookstore, Sophie dragged Simone to the children's section. We should get some books to read together, she said. Like we used to. Like we used to. The words hung in the air. Simone had read to Sophie every night before bed when she was a baby, classic picture books with rhyming words and colorful illustrations. She hadn't thought Sophie would remember. You remember that? Simone asked softly. I remember lots of things. Sophie pulled a book off the shelf. I remember your voice. And how you used to do funny accents for all the characters. And how you'd always give me one more story even when Dad said it was bedtime. Simone's throat tightened. All those little moments she had thought were lost, forgotten. But Sophie had held on to them, treasured them, kept them alive. They left the bookstore with a stack of chapter books that Sophie insisted they would read together, one chapter each night before bed. As they walked to the car, Sophie slipped her hand into Simone's, and Simone felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly knocked her over. This was what she had lost. This simple act of holding her daughter's hand, of being part of her life, of building memories together. And now, impossibly, she was getting it back. That night, true to her word, Sophie brought the first book to Simone's new room. Can we read in here? Your room is so cozy now. They settled onto the bed together, Sophie curled against her mother's side, as Simone opened the book and began to read. The story was about a girl who got lost in a forest and had to find her way home. Simone found herself getting choked up at certain passages, at the themes of being lost and found, of home and belonging. When she finished the chapter, Sophie looked up at her with serious eyes. Are you glad you're home, Mom? More glad than I can possibly say. Even though it's scary? Even though things are different? Simone thought about this. Yes, it was scary. Yes, everything was different. But sitting here with Sophie, in a room that was slowly becoming hers, in a home where she was welcome, she felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Even though it's scary, she confirmed. Some of the best things in life are scary at first. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer. She kissed her mother's cheek and said goodnight, then skipped off to her own room. Simone sat alone in her new space, surrounded by things chosen with love and care, and allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could build a real life here. The next morning, Simone woke to find a note slipped under her door. It was from Gregory, written in his neat handwriting. I've been thinking about what you said about not expecting to pick up where we left off. You're right that we can't go back to what we were. But I think we can build something new. Something better. If you're willing to try, so am I. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. D. Simone read the note 3 times, each time finding new meaning in the words. He wasn't offering instant forgiveness or pretending the past 5 years didn't happen. But he was offering a chance. A possibility. A future. She folded the note carefully and tucked it into the drawer of her new nightstand. Then she got dressed in her new clothes, brushed her hair, and went to make breakfast for her family. It was a small thing, making breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy. But as she stood in the kitchen, listening to Sophie's laughter from her bedroom and the sound of Gregory's shower running, Simone felt something she had almost forgotten existed. She felt like she belonged. 3 weeks into her return, Simone sat in Dr. Kim's office, trying to explain the guilt that still weighed on her like a physical thing. "I'm here, I'm getting better, Sophie is happy," Simone said. "But I still feel like I don't deserve any of it. Like I'm waiting for someone to realize this is all a mistake and send me back to the streets." "That's a normal reaction to trauma," Dr. Kim assured her. "You spent 5 years punishing yourself for a decision you made while you were sick. That mindset doesn't just disappear because your circumstances changed. We need to actively work on rebuilding your sense of self-worth." "How do I do that?" "By accepting that you made a mistake, but that mistake doesn't define you. By recognizing that mental illness clouded your judgment, but you still made the best decision you could with the information you had at the time. And by allowing yourself to be helped without attaching strings to that help." Simone thought about Gregory's note, about his offer to build something new. Gregory wants to try again. Not now, but eventually. He wants us to be a family again. How does that make you feel? Terrified. The word came out before Simone could censor it. What if I mess it up again? What if the thoughts come back? What if I'm not strong enough? "Those are all valid fears," Dr. Kim said. "But notice something. You're not saying you don't want to try. You're saying you're afraid of failing. That's different." Simone nodded slowly. "I do want to try. I want my family back. Then we need to work on giving you the tools to succeed. Coping mechanisms for when the anxiety gets bad. Strategies for communicating when you're struggling. A support system beyond just Gregory and Sophie." Dr. Kim was right. Simone had been so focused on making things right with Gregory and Sophie that she hadn't thought about building a broader life. She had no friends, no job, no identity outside of being Sophie's mother. "I used to be an accountant," Simone said. "Before everything happened. I was good at it. Do you want to work again?" "I don't know. Maybe. But who would hire me? I have a 5-year gap in my resume and no good explanation for it." "We can work on that," Dr. Kim said. "There are programs that help people who've experienced homelessness get back into the workforce. And you'd be surprised how understanding some employers can be when you're honest about mental health struggles." The idea of working again, of having a purpose beyond just existing, was both exciting and terrifying. But Simone was learning that most good things came with fear attached. The key was doing them anyway. That afternoon, Simone decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. She had barely left the penthouse since arriving, too afraid of running into people she used to know, too ashamed of her appearance despite the new clothes. But she couldn't hide forever. The streets of downtown Chicago were crowded with people rushing to and from work, tourists taking photos, delivery trucks honking at taxis. Simone walked slowly, taking it all in. She stopped at a small park and sat on a bench, watching children play on the swings while their parents chatted nearby. A woman sat down on the other end of the bench, juggling a coffee and a stroller. The baby inside was fussing and the woman looked exhausted. "Everything okay?" Simone asked without thinking. The woman gave her a tired smile. "Just one of those days, you know? He won't nap, won't eat, won't stop crying. I love him more than anything, but sometimes I fantasize about just getting in the car and driving away for a few hours." Simone felt her chest tighten. That's normal. Being a mother is hard. Everyone says it's the most rewarding job in the world, but right now it just feels hard. The woman paused, then added, "Sorry, I don't usually complain to strangers." "Don't apologize." Simone hesitated, then said, "Can I tell you something? When my daughter was a baby, I had terrible thoughts about hurting her. Not because I wanted to, but because my brain was sick. I was so ashamed that I ran away. I spent 5 years homeless because I thought I was a bad mother." The woman stared at her. "What happened?" "I got help. I learned that what I experienced was a medical condition called postpartum psychosis. It wasn't my fault and it didn't make me a bad person. And now I'm rebuilding my relationship with my daughter." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you said you fantasize about driving away, and I want you to know that having those thoughts doesn't make you a bad mother. Makes you human. But if the thoughts get really bad, if they become intrusive or scary, please talk to someone. Don't make my mistake." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." I needed to hear that. As Simone walked back to the penthouse, she felt something shift inside her. Maybe her experience, as terrible as it had been, could help someone else. Maybe she could turn her pain into purpose. When she got home, Gregory was already there, cooking dinner while Sophie set the table. It was such a domestic scene, so normal and comfortable, that Simone stopped in the doorway just to take it in. "There you are," Gregory said, looking up from the stove. "I was starting to worry. I went for a walk. Needed some fresh air." "How was it?" "Good. Really good, actually." She hung up her coat and went to help Sophie with the napkins. "I had an interesting conversation with another mother. Made me think about maybe doing something with my experience. Helping other women who are struggling with postpartum mental health." Gregory turned off the stove and gave her his full attention. "That's a great idea. What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet. Maybe volunteering at a support group? Or talking to new mothers about what to watch out for." She shrugged. "It's just a thought." "It's a good thought," Gregory said. "But maybe wait until you're a bit further along in your own recovery? Make sure you're stable before you take on other people's struggles." He was right, and Simone appreciated his honesty. She still had work to do on herself before she could help others. But the fact that she was thinking about the future, making plans beyond just surviving day to day, felt like progress. Over dinner, Sophie told them about a project at school. "We have to interview someone about a hard time in their life and how they overcame it." "Can I interview you, Mom?" Simone's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Me? Yeah. You've overcome something really hard. You were sick and you got lost and now you're home. That's what the project is about." Simone glanced at Gregory, who gave her an encouraging nod. "If you're comfortable with it," he said quietly. "Okay," Simone said. "But you should know that some of the details are difficult. Are you ready for that?" Sophie considered this seriously. "I think so. I'm not a baby anymore, Mom. I'm almost 8. So that night, after dishes were done and homework was finished, Simone sat with Sophie and answered her questions about what had happened. She kept the details age-appropriate but didn't shy away from the truth. Sophie listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification, her young face serious and thoughtful. "So the sickness in your brain made you think things that weren't true?" Sophie asked. "Exactly. My brain was telling me lies and I believed them." "But you're better now?" "I'm getting better. With help from Dr. Kim and your dad and you." Sophie wrote this all down in her neat handwriting. "What would you tell other people who are going through something hard?" Simone thought carefully before answering. "I would tell them that asking for help isn't weak. That staying and fighting is braver than running away. And that the people who love you want to help if you let them." After Sophie went to bed, Gregory found Simone on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. He brought her a blanket and draped it over her shoulders. "You did good tonight," he said. "That couldn't have been easy. She deserves the truth. Age-appropriate but still the truth." They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Gregory said, "I've been thinking about what Dr. Kim said in our session. About how we need to build a new relationship instead of trying to recreate the old one." "Me too. I think we should start dating." He said it casually, but Simone could hear the nervousness underneath. Not living together as a married couple, not jumping back into what we were. Just dating. Getting to know each other again. Simone turned to face him. "You really want that?" "I do. But only if you do." She thought about the man he had been 5 years ago and the man he was now. The way he had brought her home without question, helped her get treatment, supported her recovery. The way he looked at Sophie with such love, the way he had been patient and kind even when he had every right to be angry. "I want that too," she said. Gregory smiled, and for the first time since she had been back, it reached his eyes. "Good. Then how about dinner on Friday? Just the two of us. Claire can watch Sophie." "A date." "A date," he confirmed. As Simone went to bed that night, she felt something unfamiliar and precious. Excitement for the future. Not just surviving, not just existing, but actually looking forward to what came next. She was healing. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly. But she was healing. Friday arrived with a flutter of nerves in Simone's stomach. She stood in front of her closet, trying to decide what to wear for her first date with Gregory in over 5 years. Nothing felt right. Everything was either too casual or too formal, too bright or too dull. Finally, she settled on the maroon dress Claire had brought her, paired with simple flats. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She had gained some weight back, her face filling out from the gauntness of her homeless years. Her hair, though still shorter than she used to wear it, was clean and styled. She looked healthy. almost like herself again. Sophie burst into the room without knocking, a habit Simone was trying to gently correct. Mom, you look so pretty. Thank you, baby. Aunt Claire is picking you up in 10 minutes, right? Yeah. We're going to make cookies and watch movies. Sophie sat on the bed, swinging her legs. Are you nervous? A little bit. Is that silly? No. Dad is nervous too. He changed his shirt 3 times. Simone smiled at this image. It's just dinner. We've had dinner together plenty of times. But this is different. This is a date. Sophie said the word with emphasis like it was something magical. Does this mean you're getting back together? We're taking things slowly, sweetheart. We need to get to know each other again first. But you love him, right? And he loves you? The directness of children could be both wonderful and challenging. Simone sat on the bed next to her daughter. Yes, I love him. But love isn't always enough on its own. We need to rebuild trust and make sure we can be good partners to each other. Sophie seemed to accept this, though she looked thoughtful. I'm glad you're trying, though. I like having both of you here. The doorbell rang, announcing Claire's arrival. Sophie jumped up and ran to answer it, leaving Simone alone with her thoughts. Love isn't always enough. She had told Sophie the truth, but it was also a truth she was still learning herself. Gregory emerged from his room a few minutes later, wearing dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt. He looked handsome and nervous, running his hand through his hair the way he always did when he was anxious. You look beautiful, he said. You look nice too. They stood there awkwardly for a moment until Sophie called out, Go on your date. Don't be weird about it. Despite the tension, they both laughed. Sophie had a way of cutting through awkwardness with her blunt observations. The restaurant Gregory had chosen was small and intimate, with dim lighting and quiet music. Not too fancy but nice enough to feel special. They were seated at a corner table, away from the main dining area. I hope this is okay, Gregory said. I thought somewhere quiet would be better for talking. It's perfect. The first few minutes were filled with safe topics. Sophie's school, Gregory's current projects at work, the weather. But eventually, Gregory set down his menu and looked at her seriously. We need to talk about what happens next. Long term, I mean. Simone had been expecting this conversation, even dreading it a little. Okay. You've been staying with us for almost a month now. Dr. Kim says you're making good progress. But we haven't really discussed what the plan is. Are you going to stay? Get your own place? What does rebuilding our relationship actually look like? These were all fair questions. Simone took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. I don't want to overstay my welcome. If you think I should get my own apartment, I understand. That's not what I'm saying. Gregory's voice was patient. I'm asking what you want. I want to be part of Sophie's life. I want to be part of your life. But I also don't want to be a burden or make you feel obligated to take care of me. You're not a burden. But I think having your own space might be good for you. For your independence and confidence. You could still see Sophie every day, still be involved in everything. You'd just have a place that's yours. Simone considered this. The idea of her own apartment was both appealing and terrifying. Appealing because it would give her autonomy, a space to call her own. Terrifying because it meant being alone again, even if only at night. What if I get worse again? What if I need help? Then we help you. Having your own place doesn't mean you're on your own, Simone. It just means you're building a life that's sustainable, not dependent on me or Sophie for every need. He was right. As much as she loved living in the penthouse, as comfortable as it was, she couldn't stay there forever. She needed to stand on her own 2 feet, prove to herself that she could be independent without falling apart. Okay, she said. I'll start looking for an apartment. Something small nearby so I can still see Sophie regularly. Gregory reached across the table and took her hand. I'll help you. With the deposit, the furniture, whatever you need. This isn't me kicking you out. This is me helping you build the foundation for a real future. His hand was warm and familiar. Simone squeezed it gently. Thank you. For everything. For not giving up on me. I gave up on you for about 3 years, he said honestly. I was so angry I convinced myself I hated you. It wasn't until I saw you on that sidewalk that I realized the anger was just hurt in disguise. You had every right to be angry. Maybe. But anger doesn't solve anything. And Sophie needed me to be better than my anger. Their food arrived, giving them a brief respite from heavy conversation. As they ate, the atmosphere lightened. They talked about old memories, good times before everything fell apart. The trip they took to New York when Simone was 6 months pregnant. The way Gregory had nearly fainted during Sophie's birth. The terrible singing voices they both had, and how they would belt out off-key duets while cooking dinner. "Do you remember the time we tried to make homemade pasta?" Gregory asked, laughing. "We ended up with dough on the ceiling. I still don't know how we managed that. You were dancing around the kitchen and flung the mixer spoon. I was pregnant and clumsy. You were adorable." The word hung between them, charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. Gregory cleared his throat and took another bite of his meal. Later, as they walked back to the car, Gregory said, "I've enjoyed tonight. I forgot how easy you are to talk to." "I enjoyed it too. Maybe we could do this again?" "I'd like that." When they got back to the penthouse, Claire was on the couch reading while Sophie slept in her room. She took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. "Good date?" "Great date," Gregory confirmed. After Claire left, Gregory walked Simone to her bedroom door. They stood in the hallway, neither quite ready to say goodnight. "I meant what I said about helping you find a place," Gregory said. "We can start looking this weekend if you want." "I want." Simone hesitated, then added, "This feels strange. Like we're teenagers again saying goodnight at my door. We're rebuilding. It's supposed to feel strange." He leaned forward and kissed her cheek, soft and brief. "Good night, Simone." "Good night." Simone closed her door and leaned against it, her hand touching the spot where he had kissed her. It was just a kiss on the cheek, nothing dramatic. But it felt like a promise. A beginning. Over the next week, they looked at apartments together. Some were too small, others too far from Sophie's school. Finally, they found a sunny one-bedroom in a good neighborhood, close enough to Gregory's place that Sophie could walk there after school if she wanted. "What do you think?" Gregory asked as they stood in the empty living room. Simone looked around at the hardwood floors, the large windows, the small kitchen that reminded her of the first apartment she had lived in after college. "I think it's perfect." "Then let's take it." The process of furnishing the apartment became a family project. Sophie insisted on helping pick out furniture, dragging them to store after store until they found just the right pieces. Green couch for the living room. A sturdy bed frame with a maroon comforter. Bookshelves that Sophie immediately began filling with books. "You need books, Mom. Everybody needs books." 2 weeks later, Simone moved into her apartment. It was strange to be alone after a month of constant companionship, but it was also empowering. This was her space, her home, a place she could rebuild her life. The first night, Sophie insisted on sleeping over. They made popcorn and watched movies until Sophie fell asleep on the couch. Simone carried her to the bed and tucked her in, then lay down beside her, listening to her daughter's steady breathing. This was what she had missed. This simple act of being a mother. Not the big moments but the small ones. The everyday acts of love that built a life. She woke the next morning to find Sophie already up, making toast in the kitchen. Simone watched from the doorway as her daughter carefully buttered the bread, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "Good morning, chef." Sophie jumped, then grinned. "I'm making us breakfast. I found the bread and butter." They ate their simple breakfast together, and Simone felt a contentment she had almost forgotten existed. She had her own place. Her daughter was here. And somewhere across the city, Gregory was thinking about her, planning their next date, building toward a future they could share. Life wasn't perfect. Simone still saw Dr. Kim twice a week. She still had moments of anxiety and doubt. But she was building something real, something lasting. She was building a life worth living. 3 months after moving into her apartment, Simone received a phone call that would change everything. "Hello. Simone, it's Gregory. Are you free to come to my office today? There's something I want to discuss with you." Her heart skipped. Gregory's voice was formal, professional. This wasn't about their relationship or Sophie. This was about something else. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Can you come around too?" Simone agreed and spent the rest of the morning anxious, trying to figure out what Gregory might want. She had been seeing him regularly, their dates becoming more frequent and comfortable. Sophie spent most weekends at her apartment, and sometimes Gregory joined them for dinner. Things were good. So what was this about? She arrived at Patterson and Associates at exactly 2 o'clock. The building hadn't changed at all from the outside, though inside the lobby had been remodeled with modern furniture and bright artwork. The receptionist directed her to the 20th floor, where Gregory's office was located. Gregory met her at the elevator, looking every bit the successful businessman in his gray suit. But his smile was warm and genuine. "Thanks for coming. Let's go to my office." His office had a view of the entire city. Simone stood at the window for a moment, taking it in, before sitting in one of the chairs across from his desk. "What's this about?" she asked. Gregory sat on the edge of his desk rather than behind it, keeping the atmosphere casual. My company has grown a lot in the past 5 years. We now manage properties across 3 states, and we need a strong financial director. Someone who can handle accounts, taxes, investor relations, all of that. Simone's heart began to pound. Okay. You were an excellent accountant before everything happened. One of the best I'd ever seen, actually. You have the skills and experience we need. He paused. I'm offering you the job, Simone. She stared at him. You want to hire me? Gregory, I haven't worked in 5 years. My resume has a massive gap. I've been homeless, for God's sake. I know all of that. And I also know that you're brilliant, that you're dedicated, and that you're ready to rebuild your career. He handed her a folder. This is the job description and salary information. Take it home, think about it, talk to Dr. Kim if you need to. But I want you to seriously consider this. Simone opened the folder with shaking hands. The salary listed was generous, more than she had been making before. The position was real, substantial, with responsibilities and authority. Why are you doing this? She asked. Is this pity? It's not pity. It's recognition of talent. You're wasting your potential, Simone. You could be doing something meaningful with your life, using your skills. And yes, I'm in a position to give you that opportunity, but only because I believe you can handle it. What will people think? Your employees, your clients? I don't care what they think. The people who matter will understand that everyone deserves a second chance. The people who don't understand aren't people I want to work with anyway. Simone's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. She left his office in a daze, the folder clutched in her hands. A job. A real job with benefits and responsibilities and a salary. It seemed impossible, too good to be true. But Gregory wasn't the type to make empty offers. That evening she called Dr. Kim and scheduled an emergency session. They met the next morning and Simone laid out everything. The job offer, her fears, her doubts. I want to take it, Simone admitted. But I'm terrified. What if I can't handle it? What if I have a breakdown? What if everyone judges me? Those are all valid concerns, Dr. Kim said. But let's examine them one at a time. First, do you think you're capable of doing the job? Technically, yes. I have the skills. And do you think you're stable enough mentally to handle the stress? Simone thought about this carefully. She had been doing well lately, her mood steady, her anxiety manageable. She attended therapy regularly, took her medication as prescribed, and had built a support system. I think so. With proper support and boundaries. Then the question isn't whether you can do it, but whether you're willing to try despite your fears. Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. What if I fail? Then you fail. But you'll still have Sophie, still have Gregory, still have your apartment and your life. One job isn't your entire identity. And honestly, Simone, I think you need this. You need to prove to yourself that you're capable of more than just surviving. Dr. Kim was right. Simone had spent months just getting through each day, rebuilding relationships, establishing stability. But she hadn't challenged herself. Hadn't pushed to see what she was really capable of. That night she called Gregory. I'll take the job. But I need some conditions. Name them. I need flexible hours sometimes for therapy appointments. I need people to know that I'm coming back from a difficult period and might need accommodation. And I need you to promise that if I start to struggle, you'll tell me honestly instead of letting me fail. I can agree to all of that. When can you start? Give me 2 weeks. I want to finish my current therapy module and prepare myself mentally. 2 weeks it is. Simone spent those 2 weeks preparing. She bought professional clothes, got her hair cut properly for the first time in years, reviewed accounting principles and software she hadn't touched in ages. Sophie was thrilled when she heard the news. Mom's going to work at Dad's company. That's so cool. On her first day, Simone walked into Patterson and Associates in a blue dress and blazer, her head held high despite the butterflies in her stomach. Gregory met her in the lobby and walked her upstairs, introducing her to the staff. This is Simone Carter, our new financial director. She'll be overseeing all accounting operations and reporting directly to me. Some people welcomed her warmly. Others looked curious or skeptical. One older man, Thomas, who handled investor relations, pulled Gregory aside. Are you sure about this? She's been out of work for 5 years. I'm sure, Gregory said firmly. She's the best person for this job. Simone pretended not to hear the exchange, but it stung. She would have to prove herself, earn respect, show them all that she was more than her past mistakes. Her office was smaller than Gregory's but still nice, with a window and her own desk. She spent the first few days reviewing files, learning the company's systems, getting up to speed. It was overwhelming at times but also exhilarating. By the end of her first week, Simone had identified 3 major inefficiencies in the accounting process and proposed solutions. Gregory called her into his office to discuss them. "These recommendations are excellent. How did you spot these issues so quickly?" "Fresh eyes. Sometimes being away from something for a while makes you see it more clearly when you come back." "You're doing great, Simone. Really great." Over the next few weeks, Simone settled into her role. She worked hard, arrived early, stayed late when needed. She developed good relationships with most of the staff, though a few remained distant. Thomas eventually came around after Simone caught an error in his investor reports that would have been embarrassing if submitted. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I judged you unfairly." "It's okay. I understand. I have to earn trust here." "You already have. Anyone who can catch my mistakes and tell me diplomatically is someone I want on my team." 3 months into the job, the company faced a crisis when their main investor threatened to pull funding over some financial discrepancies. Simone worked around the clock, digging through records, finding the source of the confusion, presenting a clear explanation with supporting documentation. The investor was satisfied, the funding continued, and Gregory was relieved. "You saved us," he said. "I don't know what we would have done without you. You would have figured it out. But I'm glad I could help." That night, Gregory took her to dinner to celebrate. They had been dating steadily for months now, but this felt different. There was an ease between them that hadn't existed before, a comfort born of working together and rebuilding trust. "I'm proud of you," Gregory said over dinner. "For taking the job, for facing your fears, for proving to everyone, including yourself, what you're capable of. I couldn't have done it without you. You took a risk hiring me." "It wasn't a risk. It was an investment. And it's paying off." As they walked back to his car, Gregory took her hand. They had held hands before, kissed goodnight at her door, but there was something different in his touch tonight. Something purposeful. "Simone, I want to talk about us. About where we're going." Her heart began to race. "Okay. We've been taking things slow, rebuilding trust, making sure we're both ready. And I think we are. I think we're ready to be more than just dating. I want you to be my partner again. Not my ex-wife who I'm trying things out with, but my partner." "What does that mean practically?" "It means I love you. So, again. Always. It means I want to build a future with you, not just coexist. It means I want Sophie to see us as a united family, not 2 people trying to figure things out." Simone's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too. I never stopped loving you even when I was at my worst. Even when I thought I'd lost you forever." Gregory cupped her face in his hands. "You haven't lost me. You never lost me. You just had to find yourself first." He kissed her, then really kissed her for the first time in over 5 years. And Simone felt something inside her click into place, a piece of herself that had been missing finally returning home. 6 months had passed since Simone started working at Patterson and Associates. It was early summer now, warm and bright, with flowers blooming in the city parks. Simone sat at her desk, reviewing quarterly reports, when her phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Can we go to the park after work? I want to practice cartwheels." Simone smiled and texted back, "Of course. Meet you at our usual spot at 5 o'clock. Our usual spot. They had developed routines, traditions. Every Thursday after work, Simone picked up Sophie from school and they went to the park. Every Sunday they made pancakes together in Simone's apartment. Every other weekend, Sophie slept over, and they stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. Simone had also started volunteering. Once a month, she spoke at a support group for women experiencing postpartum mental health issues. She shared her story honestly, holding nothing back, and watched as women nodded in recognition, tears in their eyes. Knowing her pain could help someone else made all the suffering worthwhile. Her relationship with Gregory had deepened slowly but steadily. They saw each other several times a week, sometimes for dates, sometimes just for quiet dinners at home. They talked about everything: their past mistakes, their current challenges, their dreams for the future. The trust they were building was stronger than what they had before because it was built on honesty and hard work. At 5 o'clock, Simone left the office and walked to the park. It was the same park where she had once spoken to that exhausted mother, the conversation that had sparked her desire to help others. Now it was a place of joy, where she watched her daughter play and laugh. Sophie was already there, practicing handstands against a tree. She ran over when she saw her mother, her face flushed with exertion. "Watch this. I can do 3 cartwheels in a row now." Simone watched, applauding enthusiastically as Sophie performed her cartwheels across the grass. When she finished, they sat together on a bench, sharing a water bottle. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you and Dad getting married again?" Simone had been expecting this question for a while. Sophie was perceptive, and it was obvious that Gregory and Simone's relationship had moved beyond just dating. "Would you want that?" Simone asked. "Yeah. I mean, you love each other, right? And we're already kind of a family. It would just make it official." "Your dad and I are talking about it," Simone said carefully. "We want to make sure we're ready, that we're doing it for the right reasons. The right reason is that you love each other and want to be together." "That seems pretty simple to me." Out of the mouths of babes. Sophie made it sound so simple, and maybe it was. Simone and Gregory had spent months overcomplicating things, analyzing every step, making sure they were ready. But at the end of the day, it really was simple. They loved each other and wanted to be together. That evening, Gregory came to Simone's apartment for dinner. It had become their routine on Tuesdays, alternating who cooked. Tonight was Simone's turn, and she had made pasta with homemade sauce. "This is delicious," Gregory said. "You've gotten better at cooking." "I had a lot of time to practice in shelters and soup kitchens." "You learn to be creative with limited ingredients." She said it matter-of-factly now, without shame. Her time on the streets was part of her story, part of who she was. She didn't hide from it anymore. After dinner, they sat on her small balcony, watching the sun set over the city. Gregory reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Simone's breath caught. "Gregory, before you say anything, let me talk." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring with a single diamond. "This isn't the same ring from before. That one belonged to who we were. This one is for who we are now. People who have been through hell and come out the other side. People who have learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about commitment and forgiveness and choosing each other every single day." Tears streamed down Simone's face. "I'm not asking you to marry me right away," Gregory continued. "I'm asking you to agree to marry me someday. When we're both ready. When we've built something so strong that nothing can shake it. Will you wear this ring as a promise? A promise that we're building toward forever?" "Yes." The word came out as a whisper, then stronger. "Yes, I will." He slipped the ring on her finger, and Simone looked at it through tears. It was beautiful and meaningful and represented everything they had overcome. They told Sophie the next day. She squealed with delight and insisted on calling everyone she knew to share the news. Claire cried when she heard, hugging Simone tightly. "I never thought I'd see my brother this happy again," she said. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for fighting." Over the next few months, Simone and Gregory discussed what their future would look like. They decided to wait a year before actually getting married, wanting to be absolutely sure they were ready. In the meantime, they would continue building their life together, slowly merging their households, creating new traditions. Simone's therapy sessions with Dr. Kim became less frequent as she stabilized, though she maintained monthly check-ins. She continued her volunteer work, expanding to speak at other support groups and even writing an article for a mental health magazine about her experience. At work, she was promoted to Chief Financial Officer, overseeing all financial operations for the company. Thomas joked that she was overqualified for the position. "You could be doing this for a much bigger company," he said. "Why stay here?" "Because this is where my family is," Simone said simply. "Money and prestige aren't everything." 1 year after Gregory gave her the promise ring, on a perfect autumn day with leaves changing colors and the air crisp and clear, Simone and Gregory stood in a small garden ceremony surrounded by family and close friends. Sophie stood beside them as their flower girl, beaming with pride. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. No grand declarations, no elaborate displays. Just two people who had found each other, lost each other, and found their way back, promising to love each other through whatever came next. "I promise to be honest with you even when it's hard," Simone said through tears. "I promise to ask for help when I need it and to be there when you need me. I promise to be the partner you deserve and the mother Sophie deserves. And I promise to never give up on us again." Gregory's vows were equally honest. "I promise to see you, really see you, not just as a wife or mother but as a whole person with needs and dreams. I promise to support your healing and growth. I promise to choose forgiveness over resentment, hope over fear. And I promise to build a life with you that's worth all the pain we went through to get here." When they kissed, Sophie cheered loudly and everyone laughed. They were a family again. Not the family they had been before, but something new and better. A family built on truth and hard work and unconditional love. At the reception, Simone looked around at the people who had supported her journey. Dr. Kim was there, smiling proudly. Beverly from the shelter had come, dressed in her best clothes, tears streaming down her face as she hugged Simone. "You made it," Beverly whispered. "You really made it." "We both can," Simone whispered back. "It's never too late." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Sophie climbed into Simone's lap, tired but happy. "This was the best day ever," she said. "It was pretty great," Simone agreed. "Do you think you'll ever be scared again, Mom? Scared like you were before?" Simone thought about this carefully. She could lie, could promise Sophie that she would never struggle again. But they had built their new life on honesty, and she wasn't about to start lying now. "I might be," she said. "Life is hard sometimes and scary things happen. But the difference is that now I know I don't have to face those scary things alone. I have you and Dad and Dr. Kim and all the people who love me. And I've learned that asking for help isn't weak, it's brave." Sophie nodded solemnly. "I'll always help you, Mom. Always." "I know you will, baby." As Simone sat there with her daughter in her arms, her new husband beside her, and a life full of possibilities stretching out before her, she felt something she had thought she'd lost forever: peace. Not the absence of problems or challenges, but a deep, fundamental peace that came from knowing she was loved, she was worthy, and she had the strength to face whatever came next. Her journey hadn't been easy. She had lost years to illness and homelessness, made terrible mistakes, hurt the people she loved most. But she had also learned that it's never too late to come home, never too late to heal, never too late to start again. 5 years ago, she had been sitting on a cold sidewalk, invisible and alone. Now she was here, surrounded by love, building a future she never thought possible. The story could have ended tragically. It almost did. But instead, it ended with hope, with love, with a family made whole again. It ended with a new beginning.